we're kind of used to going. So anybody not have Excel on your laptops? Or Word? Totally cool if you don't, but if you do, that'll I just want to make sure we go to what you guys have. Okay, good. We'll do that then, because it looks like most of you have the software and not all of you have steady use of Gmail or Google Sheets. So we've got both. Oh, we go either way. So how about this? What we'll do is we'll work a little bit in both, if you guys like that idea. Does that sound good, Bill? Yeah.
Here's a dry rain.
All right.
Oh, we should probably get to it.
I was just doing some pre-tech checking to see which way we were gonna go.
Edmondson is a dear colleague of ours in the School of Journalism. Her primary area of expertise is First Amendment law. She wrote the book on Times v. Sullivan, which is one of our most important legal precedents. It's under threat all the time. So she's often asked by local, regional and national people for commentary on that. But her other area of expertise is data-driven reporting and journalism. She's a longtime member of IRA. She's a longtime member of many of the organizations that do this stuff. She teaches our data journalism course at both the undergraduate and graduate level. Her other jobs include she's the graduate director for the School of Journalism, and she also has been interim graduate dean for the entire College of Communication. So she's been very, very busy this past year and a half, and we're very grateful that she took some time out to talk to us today about techniques for data-driven journalism.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. It's an honor to be here. I'm so glad to talk to you a little bit about what I have learned as a reporter, and of course now as a professor teaching data journalism. And so with that, I just want to tell you that I pretty much have no interest in math, and I'm not all that interested in computers. So you're probably like, wait, what are you doing? So, but as a reporter, I worked in newspapers in Louisiana and Georgia and Memphis, Tennessee, and covered beats such as, police, government, really anything, poverty, general assignment, sports. I've probably covered it. And so as I began working more with projects and more what I saw as stories relating to social ills and things like that, I found that I needed context. I needed the tools that data journalism provided. So pretty much was self-taught, did a couple of weekend workshops when I was a reporter down in Georgia, and it really did change the way I think about journalism. And so we used to think, oh, it takes all this time to do data-driven projects. How am I going to have time for that? So we're going to talk about how to find data quickly, how to use this in daily stories, how to possibly employ these techniques and maybe some more long-term stuff, and just get into what we call a data state of mind. And so what my brain typically does, and other data journalists' brains typically do, is when you see a story, an incident, you're like, okay, context, where does this fit into the big picture, right? And so I'm going to kind of come out here with an example that's really famous, but also quite depressing. I've got two of these back to back, which I realized as I was setting this up. Here's a famous example of data journalism that some of you guys might be familiar with, that the Washington Post did. The Washington Post tracked, as you can see here, 8,520 fatal police shootings since 2015. Well, what happened in 2015? Here we had the shooting of an unarmed Black man, Michael Brown, in 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, that launched the Black Lives Matter movement. So data journalists, when this erupted, data journalists as we start having this national conversation more urgently about the police killing its citizenry, data journalists said, okay, how common is this? Now you can get data from the police relating to how many police officers have been killed on duty. So you can get that, but conveniently, this was not data that you could request from a local police department at the local, state, federal level. There's no data. So data journalists got together, including one of our Scripps grads, a guy named Wes Lowry, who covered Ferguson and helped create this data set that was compiled using news reports from all over the country and any different way they could find. If it popped up on Google News, they would get a prompt. And so they built this spreadsheet and allow everybody to use it. So I could capture just the Ohio data or just the Southeast Ohio data using their information, okay? And so with that, we have a lot more power to talk about Michael Brown and everybody else who's been killed. This won a Pulitzer Prize. It started in 2015 and is really high impact. One of the best pieces of data journalism, I think, of the last 10, 15 years. Okay. And again, that context is everything. And so with the data state of mind, we're going to talk about 3 different examples of stories today, and you're going to get your hands on some data, and we're going to do some calculations and some sorting and some filtering, etc. So Bill emailed to you 3 spreadsheets. And so if you want to go ahead and grab those, we're going to start with the physician immigration story. And so it is the one that looks like this. Africa physician immigration. And we're going to walk through the concepts of data journalism using this example. And I use this in my classes when I teach in the spring. Okay, so I'll wait for you guys to pull this up. And we'll talk about what it is and how it is that it works. Yes. There you go. So what you would do is look in your email from Bill and then save these files locally to your desktop. Sound good? Yeah, got it. Great. And once you get this particular spreadsheet up, go ahead and do a save as, so that you're working on a new, fresh copy.
Yeah, it's still loading.
Still loading.
Very old computer.
Oh, yes. In the lights. Yeah, looking for your email from Bill.
Oh, did you send that?
Yes. Yes. I think you said this morning at the crack of dawn, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll wait for the server. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's email. Oh, saving it as. Oh, you're way ahead of me. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so what are we saving it as? Well, thank you. Appreciate it. So once you get this up, what I always do when I save is I'll just go to save as, and I just put my initials. I do an underscore and my initials, Aimee Edmondson. That way I know I'm not working in the original spreadsheet. So if I mess something up, I've still got my good data, because I will mess something up. I'll hit a button and go, what just happened, right? And so I know that I'm working from my copy after I put my initials there. And then I'm just going to save it somewhere locally on my desktop or in a folder where all my data is sitting, that kind of thing. And I like to kind of prowl around and make sure we never leave anybody behind, because sometimes somebody might go, oh, she just got to step ahead. Oh, I'm panicking. If that happens, raise your hand and go, slow down. All right. And the other thing is, because most of you have somebody next to you, as we go through each step, as we do a formula, go ahead and do what I'm doing. Make sure that you have what I have on the screen, and then immediately look at your partner's computer and make sure they've got it too. Right? I tell my students in class, look on your students' papers, look on your students' computers, and help each other. And that's what's happening here. Perfect. Perfect. And I also joke to my students using, we're like the Marine Corps. We never leave a soldier behind, right? It's like, we're never going to leave you two or three steps behind. So you're good. Get an email there. You were already way ahead of me. You're good. Okay, great. You're at the save as point. All right. And so while you guys are kind of finishing up here, I wanted to use this as an example because it kind of speaks to a particular instance and how you can have one thing happen and you can expand with context in this data. Okay. So now I've got it saved, and it's hopefully you guys in the back can sort of see a little bit. I have had students literally run up and get close to the screen if they can't see what I'm doing. So I'll make it a little bigger. Okay, so while others of you are finishing up, getting this saved and opened, I just want to give you a little background on this spreadsheet. So Excel is software that was created for and by accountants, right? And journalists have taken this software or Google Sheets and used about maybe 5% of what Excel or Google Sheets actually does. And so I'll show you today the bulk of what most data journalists do. And there's an incredible amount of power in using these spreadsheets to find these patterns. I had the great good fortune of being invited to Kenya to teach data journalism alongside a conference that was happening, that was a regional conference in Nairobi about health communication. And so these are a bunch of doctors who were all together, and journalists came to cover this big health conference in Nairobi. I got to go with the journalists and then help them with the data part. And so there was a guest speaker at this health communication conference full of doctors and medical folks. And they were talking about how what we know about science, what we know about preventing disease, that kind of thing. How do we take what we know about preventing disease and get it to the public? What kind of media do they consume? Is radio the best? In many instances it was. Just kind of now, how do we get it to your phone? That kind of thing. And so that's what the doctors at the conference were all talking about, health outcomes on the continent. And so a lot of these journalists that I was hanging out with were assigned to cover the keynote speaker of this big conference. And the keynote speaker was talking about health outcomes on the continent and how to improve them, how to have lower infant mortality rates, lower maternal mortality rates, you name it. And what she said in this keynote address was, a really big issue we're having is the brain drain, and I quote, of physicians who have left their home countries in Africa and gone elsewhere. So we do not have enough doctors. And so to me, that's a great quote. Brain drain is pretty powerful. I was like, hey, it's pithy. And so if you're a reporter, you're covering this speech, the keynote speech, you're going to say, this is what this, learned MD said about one of the big issues we got to solve is keeping physicians home. All right. And so, yeah, you could go back to your newsroom or sit there and write your coverage of the keynote speaker. But that's being a repeater. And that's okay. Do that. But you want to be a reporter. And so you're asking yourself as a data journalist or someone who's interested in data, context. Is this true? How many are leaving? Where are they going? So I get back to my hotel room. We file the story that covers the keynote speech that says what they said, but the story has legs. You got a second day story that says, maybe if you can find some data, how bad is this situation? So I get online, literally Googling. I'm Googling physicians, brain drain, Africa, physicians leaving. I mean, any kind of just, I don't know, I'm no expert in Googling things, but what popped up was this spreadsheet. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Who is this? So then you start kicking in with your traditional journalism skills as you're going, okay, I'm about to use a source. You're using what you know as a journalist to evaluate the credibility of the source, the human being. You do the exact same thing with data. What is this? Is it reliable? So I get on this website, and this is typically where you're going to find the source. The Center for Global Development. This was on the spreadsheet that I downloaded that I got off Google. And the source was a couple of academics, medical leave, a new database of health professional immigration from Africa. And then I say, oh, okay, they're in Washington, D.C. All right, we'll check it out. So I did some work, looked at their website, came to the conclusion that these guys were highly credible. And so I was like, okay, I can probably use these guys as a source. And then I say, okay, how did they get the data? They tracked physicians born in African countries appearing in the census of 9 receiving countries. Wow, what a ton of work. But a couple of academics did it. And they're going to be thrilled when a journalist comes along and goes, hey, I'm really interested in your work. I'd like to interview you. I want to use your data, etc. And so this, even though the census is every 10 years, and this is 2000, you would definitely be going, okay, where's the 2010? Where's the 2020 if we've got it? But I would argue that even if the census data is a little bit older, that shows a pattern. And wouldn't it be interesting to get newer census data and older census data to see how this pattern came to be? All right, so now let's do some data analysis, shall we? All right. So first thing you do is you interview your data. How are the data organized? I look to see what's here using just common sense. It looks like it's alphabetized by the country, all right, where the physician is from. And then these are the receiving country. So this would be in cell B2, right, B2, 45 physicians left Algeria and have shown up in the census in the UK. All right, 50 have come to the US, big group, language similarity, of course, 10,000 in France, etc. Okay, so that's how that's organized. And that gives you a feel. There aren't any totals, right? And you'll notice South Africa is a receiving. Interesting. And then if you scroll down, since this is alphabetized, you'll see there's also a row for sending. Okay, so we're going to do a little analysis to just see what we're looking at in terms of numbers and find ourselves what we call that contextual nut graph that says this is the big picture. of what the situation is according to this keynote speaker and this brain drain quote, right? All right, so is anybody not here? Is everybody with me? Everybody good? Okay, so let's do our first formula, right? So what we're gonna do is, and you'll come along with me, please, is put your cursor in the cell address K1. Yeah. And you're gonna write total. Make yourself a new column and hit enter. Now, when you're gonna hit the equal sign, okay, you are queuing this accounting software. We're about to start doing some really elementary math. We're gonna sum, right? We're just gonna do a total. So we're gonna go by address. First thing we're gonna do is calculate horizontally on the row by cell address, B2, all the way to J2, so that we will know what's going on just in Algeria for now, okay? So equals, and then sum. You're going to open parentheses. Okay. Then you're going to go by cell address, as I mentioned before, which is B2. Right. And you can see it highlighted itself, so you can check your work, make sure you grab the right cell. Right. And then range is a colon. So range colon to J2. And it very kindly highlights before you hit enter, just to make sure you grab the right thing, right? Just to make sure you grab the right thing. Close parens. Okay, so there's your formula. It's also really tiny, but you can see it in the function bar right here.
Oh, yes.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and see if it worked. It did. Okay, so go ahead, and even though you hit return and it went down to K3, which you can also tell because it tells you where your cursor is sitting. Go ahead and go back up to K2 and rest a minute. So this is what we, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes. What you need is sum right there. You want to tell it to sum in between the equals and that first parenthesis. First parenthesis. Oops. Forgot how to zoom.
Just double tap on your little, zoom in.
Uh-oh.
Just double tap on your trackpad. which is-
Oh, okay. Hold on. It's my formula.
No, it's not, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
Hold on. Sure.
Amy and I are old friends.
We are. Okay, here we go. Oh, just double. Oh, there we go.
And that'll zoom in, and then double tap to zoom back out.
Okay.
You could alternately, you could take the view tab.
Oh, this, okay,
the
this
view
did
tab
the,
on top
Yeah.
this did the magnification.
can also zoom in for you.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. That is always how I do it, to be honest with you. And so I can go back that way. That's easier.
I think you have to place the cursor on K2 first.
Yes, we can see the, yeah. All right, no, this is good. Whenever I teach a session, I always learn something new without fail. So you could see. Another way to do it would be
Yeah.
bigger, and then I could just, when I'm doing the formula, go, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so is anybody not here? If you need help, holler and we'll come. Right. All right. Oh, you're close. Okay. Let me, do you mind? Okay, great. All right. Here. Get used to your computer here. You go. Let's see. Let me get you to delete that. Okay, here we go. All right. One more time. One more time. There we go. Okay. Equals. That should be it. Yay. Okay. And so then when you put your cursor back on it, you can see the formula right there. Yeah. All right. Anybody else need anything? Thanks, Kay. Appreciate you just kind of lurking around and helping us out. All right. This is the beauty of Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you end up using. So you could have a million rows, not exaggerating. And this will copy down automatically. So once you get to this point where you've done the first formula, notice I've got what we call in scientific circles, a big fat white cross. Now, hover bottom right till it turns into a little skinny cross.
Yeah.
Double click. It's going to copy the formula all the way down. Ta-da! How cool is that? Usually I get a and we've got smaller spreadsheets. It's better to work when you're getting used to data journalism with smaller data sets, but that same thing would happen just as fast if you had 100,000 rows. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Double click, no need to drag. All right, everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay, so typically after we do a calculation like this, we'll sort because journalism is a business of extremes, the highest, the lowest, the biggest, the smallest, right? So.
Hey, Amy, we've got a roadblock back here.
Oh, okay.
Let Simon and Peter get caught up.
All right. Yeah. Again, never leave a man or a woman behind. It's true. It's true. And look on each other's computers. Make sure the other one has what you have. So good. All right. You've learned something today. My work is done. Okay, let's go get coffee. Oh, yeah. And this is a calculator, but on steroids. It's a beast of a calculator. Okay, so you'll now want to go under data, the data tab up here. You can see that. Bunch of different ways to sort, but I'm just going to show you this. I am under the data tab. Okay. And notice that my cursor is sitting in column K. You know that obviously because it's here and this is highlighted. So we're going to sort high to low to see which country in Africa has this biggest brain drain that we've been hearing about, right? So we'll go and you can kind of hover in the middle here and sort, and it'll tell you A to Z is smallest to largest, Z to A is largest to smallest. That's what we want to do. Either's fine, but let's go largest to smallest. And so you have sorted. And South Africa pops up where? You got it, popped up second. So wow, your news value just went up because of where you're from if you're covering this whole conference on Nairobi, right? Oh, yes. Yeah, here's one a little different. Let's see. So, Yeah, okay, so. Now, go to the data tab.
This is my music.
Right.
Selected name.
Data.
Like another name.
Touch your screen. It's a Google screen. So you wanna go to see it and read?
That's.
Oh, we do generally. See it and read. You got it. You bet, you bet. We can check. Yes, data. Right here, C to A. C to A. C, largest to smallest. Good. Like, I'm sorry. You got it. Highest to lowest. Yeah. Yes. Huh. Good. Good. Everybody good? Good. All right. All right. Now, whenever I do a calculation and sort, it's not a bad idea to save your work in case something. So I save from time to time when I'm doing calculations. And it's important to remember that you can always come back and look for your summing formula because it's going to be right here. So you'll always have that formula once you save this document, right? And if you want to do some super giant cheat sheet notes on sorting, for example, like I would, when I was first learning how to do this, I'd be like, okay, go under data, sort Z to A means large. Now that way, when I get out of the class, I'm like, I'm going to actually remember this and use it. So I see some of you are already building your super giant cheat sheet. Okay, good deal. All right, so this tells us then that according to these two academics at the Center for Global Development, that yes, in fact, it appears that 8,197 positions have popped up in countries not their own. That's really a powerful contextual sentence that really is going to help your story, don't you think? So that's a lot better than just being a repeater of what the speaker said. You're also being a reporter. You're going on the hunt, trying to figure out if you can find this data, right? Now let's do this a different way. Scroll down and put your cursor on A56. You can tell your cell address. And you want to have a space between the last piece of data and where your cursor is. And I'll explain why in a minute. So go ahead and type the word total. You want to label your work always. Then put your cursor in B56. So you're lined up under that first row. Now let's sum the other way. We're summing vertically instead of horizontally. So you know your sum formula now, and that is equals sum, open parentheses. We know it's B2, but you can go take a peek if you need to see where the data started. But we checked and it was B2. You're doing the range, colon. That means the range. Sum from here to here. And then what's your second cell address? B54, you got it. Okay, and it highlighted it for you very kindly. It's a relatively new function. Okay, close parentheses, enter. And so UK received 15,000 positions. It's really kind of amazing. Think about it. It's really amazing.
There's a lot that's coming to my mind.
Good, good. What do you, journalistically, you're thinking,
Yeah,
okay, what am I going to do here?
I'm thinking the countries that probably, when we look at stats, whether from the UN or WHO.
Yeah.
That have better health outcomes, they achieve those because of other countries, not because of their own.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That is, yes, and there are so many story ideas in this spreadsheet.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning, and we're making that conceptual leap, right? From just a awful looking grid of numbers to really meaningful journalism, right? Oh, sure, okay, equals, okay, sum, SUM. You got it, open parentheses. Let's see, I think it's right here, without a space. Yeah. There you go, parentheses, and then the address is B2, the very top, because we know there's a header, and colon B54. You're getting there. You're getting there. Good. Make sure that your partner, the person next to you, has the same thing. Okay. You're good. You're good. Okay. You're good. Great. Good. All right. Oh, you're already way ahead of me. Okay, I'll catch up with you. Okay. Okay, for those of you, a couple of you are still making sure the formula's right. Now, big fat white cross turns into a little skinny black cross, that other technical term I was telling you about. And click and drag. That double click function, I haven't gotten to work horizontally. Release. Okay. And so what you're going to see here is the total of the totals. And for those of you who are this far, how many positions are popping up in places?
65,007.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. That's a story. Now, it is important to note, however, that South Africa is in one of these. So you wouldn't be able to write that that these positions have all obviously left the continent. I mean, you could certainly delete column J and are not included in your calculations. And if you wanted to say that, but what we're saying is that countries are experiencing this brain drain indeed. And for you guys, I think if you're reporting, even if you are at this conference, this is what you're reporting, I think, that 8,100 have left and have gone somewhere else. That's incredibly powerful. It really is. So if we were to report this story out, so day one, you covered the conference and the keynote speaker. Day two, you got lucky, found some data. We're able to do a contextual data on the numbers. Now, what's the traditional shoe leather reporting beyond this data set? Where do you go from this data set in your journalism to report out this story?
I'll try and find some of the people who've left. Yeah. I'll try and understand the issues, why they left. Yeah. And also the bilateral relations, because in fact, yesterday, one of the leading stories on BBC was the fact that they're saying that too many Ghanaian nurses in the UK, and they're saying there was meant to be some moratorium after COVID on exporting nurses, and they were talking about how Ghana is suffering.
It's a big story and continues to be a big story. Yeah, for sure. Any other thoughts on how else you'd report this out besides talking to people who maybe decided to stay and those who decided to leave? Why did you stay? Why did you leave? Yes.
I perhaps scrape the web to see if there's any
shortages in the receiving countries for specific kind of physicians, or if there's perhaps a kind of deterioration of quality of education within that kind of particular reports that are out there.
Yeah,
a starting point to see if there's a problem from the receiving countries.
absolutely. So maybe some of these receiving countries have been recruiting because they've had shortages or something like that. So a lot of different ways to go about it. I've seen this reported out where the journalist, when we were working on this in Kenya, went to the local medical school in Nairobi and said, could you find me one of your grads who stayed? Because you got to find the people. That can be really hard. Can you find me one of your grads that have left? And they want to help you because they're saying, yeah, we got a brain drain. And yes, talk to somebody about why they stayed. And so that story said, I want to help my countrymen. This is where I'm from. This is where I want to stay, et cetera. I want to make a difference. And then they found somebody who had left and gone to New York City and did that interview. And it was the equipment, the tech. I wanted to learn some different specialized stuff. I got recruited, all that kind of stuff. So then you got the two reasons. I think that's a really nice way to report that out. Then you could take it a step further, perhaps, and talk to these the medical school leadership, other leaders in this field and go, okay, have you ever thought of, or is there any program in existence that says, if we educate you at the med school here in Nairobi, you got to stay for 5 years. If you get financial aid, you got to agree to sign on and help us here. Then you can leave. I mean, I know some of those things are in existence, but that's public policy that you guys could then help drive if you're so inclined. At least stay up with it and find out if there are any incentive programs to stop this quote unquote brain drain. So yeah, so that's one of my favorite examples that really show how you can report out something like, and if you were to do the totals, again, it is powerful. All right, so go ahead and save this and we'll close this out and look at a different example. We're going to call up the CPJ data set. It's the 2023 data. This is Committee to Protect Journalists. Some of you might be familiar with it. There are other groups like this, but these guys also found them, just by Googling, literally, okay, who are these guys? And so the CPJ website is fantastic. If you ever want to go to Committee to Protect Journalists, there's tons of news on here. I always, as a data journalist, want to look at the data, and there's usually a data tab somewhere. So that's where I want to go. And I was interested in journalists killed, and I'll explain why in a minute. And so this organization, this nonprofit, has been tracking journalists killed in the line since 1992. And I know there are other international organizations that do this, but these guys are international as well. And I like
We like the word South African is there.
yeah, we're gonna check it out. Yeah, very cool. And so whenever I see something like this, right? This is all good and great and pretty, but as a data journalist, I want to look at what's under the hood. What's driving this? I want to look at it myself, do my own analysis, right? So once I see this as a data journalist, I'm like, yes, there's data here. And so I've been on this website a lot, and I was just able to scroll down, and you will see this more and more. Download the database, hot diggity. Whenever I see that, my heart's just like, oh, I have found what I need. And so it'll usually download as a CSV file, comma separated value. If you see CSV, be happy, because it'll open in Excel. You can save it in Excel. It's just fine. But it'll cross platforms in a way that's very convenient. Okay, so I downloaded the database. That's how we got this from CPJ. Now, what got me interested in this was a particular example, because every story is local, right? And so we had a guy who had graduated from Ohio University who was killed in Libya on assignment. Photojournalist named Chris Hondros, who was It was pretty big news, but a handful of journalists were killed at the same time in Libya, getting caught in crossfire. There's a lot of news on this. He didn't get as much coverage because there were some really famous journalists with him. Tim Hetherington, who did Restrepo, the documentary, was the bigger news. But for us, local story.
Yeah.
Right. And so we the students here in the student media interviewed his professors, found his friends. He'd been graduated for a little while, like a couple of years, and was scheduled to be back in Athens like 3 weeks after he died. So it was really brought home that we had lost, you know, a fellow community member. If you ever have a chance, I meant to bring my coffee table book. This was a coffee table book, fancy picture book, that's quite stunning. And I meant to bring mine from home and then I forgot. But anyway, if you ever do, it's probably available in the library. You can see the work that was published after his death. So anyway, I wanted to know, how common is a death like this? CPJ tracks it. Why don't we look and see how many South African journalists have been killed? Okay, how common this is. So let's do a little bit of work here. So if you had a chance to download and save as. Everybody with me?
I mean, my data appears.
It appears a little bit funny.
It appears funny.
I think it's corrupted. I think
That's interesting.
the columns haven't separated.
Ah,
Yeah,
you know what, let's see if this will work. This may not work,
yeah.
but I'm gonna see if we can make it work.
There's a function called,
Is that the CSV?
I was just talking about how handy CSVs are.
I can easily send the, let me just send. the-
Okay.
do a
And
text,
I'm gonna see about,
a text to column separation.
yes, there you go. Text to columns is where I was heading. If you highlight the whole thing
Yeah.
and click text to columns under the data tab, see if it works.
Yeah.
Because usually a CSV will open in Excel very easily. So it's proven me wrong. Did it work?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's coming up saying, can only convert one column at a
But you can
time.
just select.
Oh,
one
that's a
column.
pain. Okay.
Select column only,
Okay.
Hold on, I'm on it.
Okay, Bill's gonna resend.
and then.
Just as
these
I was
are-
bragging about CSVs being very compatible.
You just see what happens, so if people run.
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes you'll get data that's all lumped together in a column. So that's just a good thing to know.
okay.
Under the data tab, text to columns. Did it work?
Yeah, good.
Did you go column by column?
No, I just.
All right,
selected
everybody,
column
I
A.
just resent to your email the Excel file. So it's on its way.
It's all
Thank you.
Of course it is. Thank you. Yes.
So you just.
Alert data journalist at the front. If you did you highlight just column A? So all the data just landed in column A. So if you were to highlight just column A and then go data, and here's text to columns right here, it'll work. Or you can grab what Bill emailed and use that.
Do you show us how you take a mush and turn it into colors? So you.
Yes,
So
that's-
that's the whole thing.
Well, yeah, it's just in column A. That's true. If it lands in Excel, it's of course just gonna be in column A. It makes sense. Yeah. So that's a wonderful thing to try first. If you find that you get a mismatch. Good thing to know anyway. Right? You in Excel? Oh, you're in the, oh, that's right. Okay, so. let's do this. You could just save as here. Okay. Okay, maybe then open that up. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, just column A.
We'll get there. And while if you're waiting, you can go ahead and start doing what we call interviewing your data.
So these are all comma separated.
Oh.
Then go to next. Go to finish. So we give you.
Good.
So, Dr. Edmondson, so I think like the question is after you click text to column, which are the ones that you click on?
Ah,
yeah. So, there are a couple.
Ah, there you go.
Oh,
You got it. Working the problem. Kind of fun, huh? Yeah. And when you click through, you can see that it's gonna, the tabs are there. Yeah. How y'all doing? Oh, you're set. You're good to go. Oh, yeah, you're good to go. All right. Looks like we're there.
okay.
You're good. You did it. I actually cheated because I just called not a cheat. Not a workaround. So while we're finishing up, getting one more person formatted. So every row, as you can see, is a journalist that's been killed in the line. And it's only broken out by year, not by date, specific date. And that's okay. We can work with that. Each case has been investigated. Sometimes it'll say confirmed or unconfirmed, but most of these are confirmed. As you'll see, you got the full name. If they know primarily where the person is from, some people, of course, have dual or what have you citizenships. That's what that's for. Gender, there's some missing data here. There's a little bit of investigative work here with the URLs. Media worker would be somebody who is supporting a journalist, whether it is somebody who is a translator or working equipment or something who was with the journalist. Okay, that's what that is. All right. How they died, type of death, so murder, crossfire, that's dangerous assignment, stuff like that. Status is whether they were killed or missing, were they freelancer or staff, where specifically did they work? Incredible amount of information in these rows. Notice also that this is text data, not numbers, right? So that's a big conceptual leap. Now we're going to be analyzing text instead of numbers, okay, which is something I want to make sure you got a taste of a little bit of everything. So where were they when they were killed? Column T. Okay, not to be confused with where they're from, both really interesting. But what we can do with some questions that come up, that's going to be one of the big questions. When we start asking it things, it's like maybe where's the most dangerous country, you know, something like that, right? So was it local or was the journalist local or foreign? Oh, okay. Source of fire is super interesting. Military officials, political group, sometimes they don't know. Motive confirmed or not. Was the person held accountable? Who killed them? And there's a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, this gives you a feel for what this data set looks like. That's what we call interviewing our data. What do the columns mean? What do the rows mean? If you don't know, contact CPJ and go, what does this mean? Sometimes there's a key. It's called a record layout, and you can find what columns mean. And I've just worked a lot with this data, and in the interest of time, I'm just telling you what they mean. But a lot of times it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, everybody good? Yeah. Everybody with me? All right. I still have a problem with that. Okay, we'll go ahead and move, but you can watch here. But I'll also help you as needed. Glad to. So, what kinds of things do you want to know? Somebody's been killed, and it's a local story, community story. What do you want to know from this?
How many others are from the same country?
How many from the same country?
Yes.
Yeah. How common is this?
How many is in
Yeah.
the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
No, just want to say that
Yeah.
the jobs that they were doing, because those also, there's groups that are really
Yeah.
Every time, so the types of jobs that.
The type of job. I'm kind of curious, now that you say that, you've made me think, is it gonna be photojournalists more because they have to be right there? And reporters maybe don't have to be quite as close, perhaps. I don't know, we can look. Any other stories? Yeah.
Which media companies are very active in those areas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Who's there? Are they freelancing? Are they bringing in teams of staffers? You bet. Yeah,
Were they murders or were they crossfire?
yes, yes. And our local story was Crossfire, Dangerous Assignment. But yeah, some of these are murders and you know, we just had one in the States. A guy was murdered in Las Vegas after doing a story about political corruption. So, I mean, it's happening everywhere. So let's see, first off, I'll make this just a smidge bigger here so you can see. So we have summed, we have sorted, and now we are going to filter. So we're going to filter the data to look to see how many journalists from South Africa have been killed according to this spreadsheet. All right. So we're going to go to primary nationality. That's where we're going to find where the individuals are from. Okay. And so what we're going to do first is, if you look under the data tab, you see this in the kind of in the middle here, under the data tab, there's this funnel thing, and I have no idea why it's a funnel, but it is. So if you click on the funnel, oops. Okay, so I had my cursor, for some reason it wanted me to be in row 1, which I've never seen that. But click on the filter, and then did you see when that happened, the little arrows that pop down? That tells you, yes, indeed, you are in filter mode. So the filter's highlighted right here, and you got the little arrows. Now the arrows, when you click on one, and we'll just go ahead and click on column E, primary nationality, you'll get a selection of everything that exists in the column at least once. All right. So that's how you know what's there. So I'm gonna take it to the top. So I'm gonna unselect all. If you see right here, I'm gonna unselect all. Then I'm gonna go on the hunt for South Africa. You could type it into search right here, or you could, since this is alphabetized, do a quick scroll to South Africa. Okay, so that means you have filtered everything out except what you want to zoom in on. Now I'll get rid of that little box by just clicking anywhere. Okay, so I'll stop right there, but I do want to ask if anybody can tell me how many deaths according to this data in South Africa.
In South Africa. That would be.
Yeah.
6 years.
And here's what's great. You don't have to hand count. Look in the bottom left. And it says 6 records out of 2,186 total found. So 6 South African journalists have been killed, according to this really comprehensive data set. Okay. Got it?
Yeah.
Got it. Filtering is incredibly powerful. It's a lot like sorting in that way. Okay, you guys are together. Yeah.
Oh, actually, yes, I mean, the government didn't help him. So sad.
It's 2019.
Actually, the government, our government didn't help him. So that
And then scroll down.
we are on our own.
But it says crossfire.
There's a story,
It
right?
says crossfire though.
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
Great idea. Let's Google him and find him and figure out what his situation was, for sure. That's recent.
That's super recent.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and maybe it wasn't reported on. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't widely reported. I don't know. Yeah, you know.
Okay, let's find out.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
How did you copy him?
Oh, you just copy and control C.
Must have
Go
it.
to the, yeah,
The
So,
alphabet
to the
so you'll go to-
that's the series.
There you go.
Where it starts, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Control C.
It's not India.
No,
You
no, no.
guys are
no, no.
good.
Yeah, you can check when it's stupid.
Great. There you go. You're on the way.
My city was put in May 2020.
Blood you today.
There it
It's
is.
terrible.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's the other one. I saw it. Did you find it?
Yeah, on
There,
this 24.
there it is, yay.
This 24 reported on it. They labeled it as a culpable homicide. Imagine.
Sorry,
I won't be lurking over your shoulder and make you nervous.
sorry, sorry.
Let me know if you need help.
So if you go to the story, it says he was found bludgeoned to death. How come here it's not saying not applicable?
Interesting. So each
That's
case is
amazing.
is investigated.
Yes.
And NA would be, it does seem like not applicable. I'm wondering if maybe the investigators working for CPJ couldn't confirm it.
Because it's CPJ.
Oh, it is.
CPJ, but this is
Oh,
bludgeoned
oh,
to
not
death.
available. Yeah. You know what? That's a great question.
Because it's CPJ's
Yeah.
information.
That's right. They should know.
They should-
I'm thinking that's such a real world fabulous example of what we call dirty data. And dirty data is, it's only as good as whoever entered it, and a human being entered it. And it could be that this data set, I might have downloaded this data set. And then the investigation was completed. I don't know. But that's a great question. And when you got 6, you definitely need to look into each and every one.
Because this was reported on May, oh, actually, there's a date as well. You see, killed in South Africa, May
Okay,
22. Yes, it says here, not applicable.
are not available.
You're not available.
Yeah, my guess is this, the spreadsheet that I downloaded was, gosh, that meant I downloaded it a long time ago. Interesting. But what you could do is now that it's your data set that you downloaded, you could fix it. So you could literally, there's nothing that says you can't put your hands on and tweak this data yourself. It's not some sacred thing. You're adding information that you got that spreadsheet didn't have.
But then we can also fact check that report. So
Exactly.
it's not final report.
You finally
you can
should.
fact check the reporter that if that's true.
Yeah, yeah, because this is the beginning of the reporting, right? The data is just telling us what to look for. Now we gotta go look for it. It only gives us the stars. Yeah,
So
very real
we
world.
can go back to the story and like do
Right,
a
what it says.
follow-up investigation.
Yeah.
It's very strange. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so
absolutely.
little info here.
Yeah,
But quite horrifying. It just sounds like a terrible crime thing.
yeah, you got a story, for sure.
Yeah.
And it could be done at any time. It wouldn't have to be an anniversary, with a family. So many things you can do.
Yes.
So many things you could do. Did you get it? You're good? Okay, good. All right. So what we're gonna do is take a
10-minute break.
10-minute break.
15.
A 10-minute break, give it to 10. And if you are having any questions or issues or anything, I'm glad to hang back and help you individually if you're having a problem with your data. And then we're also going to look at that third data set as well. So you can take a little break if you need to. All right. In column A. And then go to the sort button under the data tab, Z to A, high to low. So you sorted your data within that filter. That put that case that you guys were really interested in, that 2019 case, at the top. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why would you bother with that if you only have 6 items? You can just sort of eyeball it. But what if you had filtered and you had 50 items? It's really hard to eyeball 50, right? So you can sort within your filter. It's also important to know when you're in filter mode. So a few ways just to remind you, because of the arrows, you know that you're filtered by also looking at this. The row would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? But it went to 54 because that was the first South African, right? So the others are there. You just can't see them. All right. So if you had any numbers here and you did any math, the math would calculate the stuff that you can't see. So what you would do is carve out this data set and put it on a separate sheet. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, but I want to do a couple of the things first. It's in blue. It's filtered. That's item 4 on row 409, etc. You also know it's filtered bottom. We talked about this, but I don't think everybody was here yet. Bottom left, 6 out of 2,166. That's the other way it's filtered. So you don't have to be like hand counting or anything like that. You grab it. Okay. So you can go ahead and I put my cursor, and this is something that we do a lot. I'm going to copy just the filtered items and move them to that separate sheet. So my cursor has kind of turned into this little arrow thing, and I've highlighted, and let me just show you how to do it first, what I want to copy. And then I did Command C for copy. And you know that it's in copy mode because we have what you call little marching ants. Yeah. I always think of that. Somebody described that to me and just stuck with me. So I copied Command C. Then
I think the Windows is
Control. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you. Control. Keep me going. Now then I'm going to go down here to this plus sign. There's another sheet. We're going to make another sheet. Okay, so my cursor automatically went to the cell address A1, and I'm going to paste. Control or Command V is in Victor. It's just like Word, right? That's one of the great things about working in Excel. And Google Sheets has copied this as well. But if you've worked in Word, Command or Control F is fine. C and V, all that stuff. And so you got it. And then you can just work in this. Now I always label my work because I might go to lunch, come back and forget what I did. So go ahead and double click where it says sheet 2. Double click and type in South Africa. And that way you have your subset. It's really common in data journalism, let's say, to get a big data set of, like in the US, it'll be like all US data. Then I might carve out just Ohio data and work with the Ohio data. Or maybe it's by county. So I might carve out the Ohio data and then the Athens data. Just depends. So that's how you carve out a subset. All right. And that's a very common thing to do. And so then you've got them, and you could have like, a gazillion sheets all the way across. Wouldn't recommend that, but you can have a lot. Okay, so everybody good on that? Yes. Everybody okay? All right. So then we go back to the main sheet and we're going to take it out of filter mode. Okay, so go ahead and click on that funnel and you go back the way you were. Okay, don't know about the funnel, but that's what we got. And then again, South Africa is there, sorted most recent to least recent. You got it. And so because we did something kind of significant, you might do a save as, and you've got your work. Now, a couple of other cool things I wanted to show you that are really helpful when we're talking about summarizing data. So with your cursor anywhere in the data sets, we're going to go to Insert. and pivot table. A lot of power in a pivot table. This is going to be cool. So pivot table. And it's going to ask you, do you want to grab the whole table? Yes, I always do. Do you want to put it in a new worksheet? Yes, I always do. So I always just click through, and this will make a little more sense when we get there. So that takes you to something that looks like this. It's blank, and then you've got this sort of control over here. All right.
Can we do that?
Absolutely, yes. So we're gonna be back on the sheet. So here's our main sheet. So our cursor is just anywhere within our data. All right, can be in any, and it'll know to grab the whole data set. So you're gonna go to insert, pivot table, far left, pivot pops up. It's automatically going to default the way you want it. The table you're in, and you want a new worksheet rather than the existing worksheet. And that's what you get. And feel free to write yourself a note that goes, where's that again? Insert, far left, pivot table. Because I always forget stuff because we're throwing a lot of new concepts at you. And so this is kind of our command center on this side. And what's cool is you can toggle back and forth between the main sheet and your pivot table sheet. If you need to refer to, what was I going to look up again or something like that. And so what we're going to do now is determine where the most journalists have been killed. Summary data is what we're talking about. And so you want to just make a note to yourself because you've looked at the key that CPJ, you trust me, that this is the country they're killed in, column T. All right, so we're going to toggle back over to the pivot. And we're going to come over here to where the field names are. So these are all of the names. A field is a column. That's the same thing. So now we're going to go on the hunt for the existing column name called country to look to see where people have been killed. Okay, I found it. So there it is. So what I'm going to do, a couple of different ways to do this, but I'm just going to drag it and drop it into the rows. And so you're going to visualize a completely new table.
So which one did you select?
It's going to be country. That's the field or the column header that they died in. All right. So drag country down to rows and release. So you're creating a new table. Just looking at where the journalists were killed. All right. So here we go. Uh-huh.
Big question, is it the same as pivot charts? They got pivot chart. They got pivot chart.
I'll come take a hunt. I'll come take a look. Okay, insert. Pivot.
It is a pivot.
Yes, it is the same thing. Okay, so there you are. And oh, isn't that interesting? Let me go back to your table. Should be. That is really weird. Never seen that before. See something new, I promise. Whenever I teach this, okay. Insert. Table. Oh, new worksheet, new worksheet, new worksheet. Yeah, that should have been defaulted as new worksheet. Oh, but look at that. All the fields should be there. Is yours marked in?
How do you get to country? That's all.
Yes, I will show it here. A new worksheet. Oh, it should automatic. Oh, okay, okay. Click OK. And then click OK again. All right, put your cursor. Okay, it's canceled. There we go. Okay, so your cursor is there. Y'all have an interesting time. Thank you for letting me just hop on your computer. Okay, so your cursor is within. Okay. I haven't seen it just hop on. Okay, so there's the range. It automatically knows the range. New worksheet. Okay, that one worked. Okay, that one worked. Now, this one didn't. And I'm gonna come over here and see if maybe I can't figure out why. Okay, new sheet. It's in here. All right. Insert. Pivot. Okay, selected the range, new worksheet. I don't know why it didn't work, y'all. But I guess bottom line, when that first dialogue box pops up, it should click on the root. Everybody with me? All right. Y'all good? Okay, yeah. Okay, here's the thing. You don't want to highlight it. So just click on any cell within the body of the data set. Just like, yeah, there you go. Just click right there. Click. Okay, good. Now, insert tab. There you go. All right, far left for pivot. Yes. Oh, there you go. Oh, so it should automatically pick up the range, and it is not. That's interesting. Let's hit cancel there and click in a different. Let's click like just, oh, I don't know, somewhere in column P. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just in, yeah, down just a little. There you go. Okay. Now let's go to pivot again. Oh, there it is. Okay. See, what happened was Excel automatically should recognize that range. That is all the addresses of that whole table. And I always just ignore it because I don't want to like look at all that gobbledygook. It's like I can tell that it picked up the range of the whole table. You got it. Great. Yes.
So you went to
Okay, let me look and see what's going on here. Same sort of thing. Do you have a here we go. Okay, okay, all right, so we're gonna put the cursor anywhere where there's data in a field. Okay. Insert. Okay, so there's the range, new worksheet.
Inside.
Okay. Okay, there they are. All right, now let me, yes, and I'm gonna show you how to get country of it. Hold, I'm gonna back it up just a smidge. All right, so everybody's there.
Okay, so you have a new range, and then you're going to make a new one. Okay, so later you'll find country. It's there. It's good. You know,
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm gonna show you this real quick because I don't want to go too fast for y'all. Okay, this once you get that pivot table concept, you're gonna love what it can do. Okay, so we're starting fresh. We got our pivot table set up. We're gonna use the country because that's where they were killed. So we're gonna determine where have the journalists been killed most frequently. So all the fields are here. Scrolling down for that field name or column name called country. You see it? Everybody see country? All right. You're going to drag and drop it down to rows. Okay. Bottom left down there, drag and drop it to rows. Release, and it's popped up in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
So you're making a whole new table, right?
Drag and drop doesn't work.
Yes, drag and drop. Yeah.
It doesn't work on that.
It didn't work. You also might double click. Yeah, well, if you double click, it won't know where to go. I think you gotta drag and drop.
Okay.
Hey, did it go? Oh, cool. And did it pop up down here too?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Double click work. Okay, good deal. Okay, now take country again. Drag it into values. And that is the count. All right, so they've counted the number of times the word, for example, Afghanistan appeared in that country column or field, right?
I've lost the.
If you've lost the pivot table, it'll come back if you go over and click somewhere like under the row labels, it'll pop back up. You just happen to click like over here outside.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I've done that before and I've been like, I lost my pivot table. Yeah. Bunch of different ways to sort this. But if your cursor's in column B and you go high to low, so I placed my cursor anywhere in column B and sorted high to low. That then pops up with the country where the most journalists have been killed. And what do you see? Yeah, so that kind of makes some sense given what was happening in Iraq between, since 1992. What's after that?
Colombia.
Philippines? I see Philippines. Okay, which I thought's kind of surprising. Yeah, and that's 156. So I was like, whoa, I kind of understood the Iraq, the Philippines. Interesting.
The Philippines.
I can see what's going on.
Got 99 in Philippines.
Really? Huh? I'll take a look in a minute. Followed by Syria, a war zone, so that makes sense. Mexico, Pakistan, Colombia, India. Somalia, yeah. Now, as you're looking at what we call summary data, you can figure out, okay, there are a lot of places where it's pretty darn safe. And then there are places where you're thinking, okay, amazing. So you could save this pivot table and call it country killed. But this gives you that summary data idea. All right, let's do something else here using a pivot table because practice is good. So as we come over here, what about looking at where they're from? So that would be primary nationality, right? So back over to the pivot table. To get out of this, you can just unclick country and it went away. Pivot table's gone. You could have saved it and labeled it and just created a whole new pivot table if you wanted. All right. But the nationality was called primary nationality, right?
Yeah.
So let me drag it down, rows. There's primary nationality. Drag it down, values for the count. Sorting.
Iraq again.
Iraq again. So it is journalists from Iraq who have been killed in Iraq. Okay. Syria, same deal. Philippines, same deal. Mexico, Pakistan. US is higher than I would have expected. 21. Okay. So summary data can give you a really great picture of what we're talking about here. Okay, everybody with me? Any questions? The idea is to kind of do this a few times, kind of drill, right? Until you get real comfortable with the pivot table. Yeah, got it? Oh, yes, okay, yeah. Okay, okay. Got it? Okay. Primary nationality, you want to drag it to row. And you just drag and drop to row. There it is, all right? Then do it again, primary nationality, drag it down to values, and we're doing a count.
Keep it down.
Great, okay, so you've got your table created, then you put your cursor anywhere in column B. Yeah, you just put it anywhere, right here. All right, then you're gonna sort highest to lowest, so Z to A. Largest to smallest, there you go. Nothing into that.
You can do the same. Keep it down and drag.
Oh, it's there. Yeah, so you sorted high to low, but you just didn't see it. So now you got the highest at the top. Yeah, because right, we're business of extremes. We want to know the worst, the least, the best. Let's try to filter.
You need to build. There's no filter thing. Using Excel on Mac is a problem.
It's not a problem.
Well, it just kind of depends on what you're used to. So it looks like you got two of these. How about you delete column, oh, delete one of these, yeah. Either one. Yeah, and then just delete. There we go. I know you show one. Okay, so cursor anywhere, sitting anywhere in B. There you go. All right, so there's sort. Oh, there it went. Yay. The big thing is make sure your cursor is sitting in the column you want to sort, and then that thing will pop up. I think it might have been before. Yeah, got it. That. I used to be kind of a diehard PC person when it came to data, but I'm kind of getting used to the Mac. Pros and cons to both, you know, yes. Yeah. Okay, so rather than highlighting the whole column, just put your cursor anywhere in the column, just like on any cell, just like just right there. You go. Okay, so it is in the column, and you can tell the title, and that tells it where you want to sort. Data. Z to A is high to low. Got it. Got it? Good, good. All right. Starting to kind of get the feel of this a little bit. And I'm going to give you guys, I've got your emails since Bill copied me on this morning's email. If it's okay with them, I'll send you a bunch of resources and cheat sheets. And sometimes I literally have forgotten how to do something and I'll Google pivot tables in Excel, and I'll find some tutorial on YouTube or wherever and remind myself how to do stuff. So now that you've kind of got some of these primary concepts, right? You can then go, okay, how do I do a such and such? How do you sum or filter or sort? You'll have that at least kind of idea. This is what's possible, right? Okay, so to me, super cool. Pivot tables are fun. Practice, fiddle. Another thing, when you've got just two items, and this, for example, gender to me was an interesting column. So go ahead now yourselves, I'm not going to do it, and tell me using just the main sheet, this sheet, and you can do it however you want, whether it's a pivot table or using this sheet, but using this sheet would be easier. How many women? How many females have been killed? Not as many.
Which column is?
Yeah, so gender, so find the gender column and tell me, do a calculation or do something to tell me, because let's say a woman had been killed in your readership area. You definitely want to carve that out as a subset because that's unique. You're going to trust me, it's different. It's not as often.
How many women?
How many women in this data set?
How
many females?
116.
117?
17.
117? And how did you do it?
I did a pivot.
You did a pivot. You did a pivot. So you took that and you did the drag.
I did a sort.
And you did a sort. Okay, you did a sort. Any other way to do it? Anybody do it any other way? What about a filter?
Yeah.
You could do a filter. So notice there's usually like at least 3 different ways to do one thing, but there's usually more. And so because there's just 2 things and a blank, right? In this data set, to me, a filter would be 5. Let me get my filter in place. All right, so I put my cursor on the header. And I like this example too, because when you call up that filter, those are all your choices in existence. You can see we've got some blank data. It's also called dirty data, meaning it's incomplete. And so you just have to be aware when you're doing an analysis, you may want to ask yourself, well, gosh, how many of these are blank? So take that off, just do the blanks, and you can see that quite a few, 582, don't have anything in it. So that's just something to be aware of as a journalist, that the data, I mean, your reporting is only as good as that data, and the data is never perfect. Trust me, data is never perfect. So just you want to be aware of that. So how do you handle it? We can talk about how to handle it, but so I'm going to unselect all, do female, and I get to 117 out of 2186. And that's about 5%. So the data doesn't tell us why that is, but we have some ideas, right? You can do some reporting on that. All right. So everybody with me? Yeah. All right. Lots of different ways to do a number of different things. Now, one thing that we were talking about at the break was how to find data sets. And that's something I want to talk about a little bit for just a second. So with this particular data set, I had not heard of the CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, through its website. The first time I had heard of CPJ was when I was trying to figure out who keeps data on journalists killed. You know, this is years and years and years ago. And so I did a search looking for a spreadsheet. And so the way I did that was advanced search. Is anybody, are y'all pretty familiar? Do you ever do a Google advanced search? Well, this is a good thing. Okay, so what you can do you could literally Google advanced search and this will pop up, but it's google.com/advanced_search. Bunch of different ways to find Google advanced search, but if you Googled Google advanced search, click on it, it'll come up, but that's how you do it. I put in, I think, and it says, you know, this is sort of like the search bar at the top. And I will include this with my stuff so you can see this more closely in the material that I sent to you. And at this point, I did put Committee to Protect Journalists in, but I think at the time I was like, journalists killed on duty or something like that. Journalists killed. And then I also, and this is sort of the best part of that, file type is at the very bottom, Excel. So you can just search the web for Excel or PowerPoint or whatever. It's amazing what people put up here on PowerPoint. Other thing you could do is you could do, you know, journalists killed, and then right after it, you could write file type : XLS. And you're just looking for spreadsheets. I think that's very cool, because I'm always looking for data, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about finding data, because that can be the biggest. How do you find data? How do you find data? Well, health data is going to be readily available through things like, oh, and I deleted them, but the World Bank, the World Health Organization, other places you guys can think of. the UN. And there's lots of cool stuff where you can download and do things like life expectancy, infant mortality, maternal mortality, a jillion different measures. So that's some great health data that you can download and use. And I wanted to show you, let me grab my slide here. Okay, there's Chris. The other thing that we do a lot, and I've talked about make your own coming right out of the gates with the Washington Post. The police don't keep the data or release the data on how many citizens they kill, right? So the Post made their own. So think about how you might make your own spreadsheets. It's time consuming, but you could update it every year and keep it there for your use. And one of my favorite examples, and I hope this will have you thinking about things that might work back home, but this guy was an ABC News reporter named Mark Knoller, who became very famous when he started keeping every time the president of the United States left Washington, D.C., wheels up on Air Force One. Where are they going? What are they doing? And so every row in the spreadsheet that Mark Knoller made is when the president leaves the White House. Now he's part of the White House press corps. And so if you think about, God, like 100 reporters, how do you stand out among 100 reporters covering, you know, something like a president of a country? It's hard to stand out. Mark Knoller did it by data. And so he just very patiently kept the spreadsheet. He's been around forever. He kept it for Clinton, President Clinton, and the two President Bushes. And they would track how many times the president went anywhere. And so this was a story that I just grabbed off the New York Times. The venerable New York Times uses Mark Knoller from ABC News as a source. They're using his data and crediting him. It's like, whoa, he kicked their butts, right? They got to quote another journalist, but they did it because it's cool. And so what happened in this particular example was when President Obama was running for re-election, the Republicans said, not fair. He gets to use Air Force One to travel to all the swing states. And even though he's on, presidential business, he's doing fundraisers, he's going to some rallies, he's got a town hall, campaigning. Excellent. So the Republicans are just not fair, not fair. Well, instead of just doing, as you can see, a he said, she said, or a they said, because when a Republican president is in office, they do the exact same thing, and then the Democrats are complaining. So let's do better than just writing the story that has the other side complaining. How many times did they go, right, and be able to say? And what Mark Knoller was able to say was every president's done it for the last 30 years. And so that story is what the New York Times did using Mark Knoller's handmade spreadsheet. So you might think of a way to build spreadsheets to do simple counts and summing and stuff like that, and do that contextual story that beats everybody. Another thing that he did with it, because the data is just fun, is that there's a big thing about, oh, well, President Obama's on the golf course all the time. Well, there was a column in Mark Knoller's data that was like, where'd they go, what'd they do? And there was a golf was included. So he was able to write, and he tweeted that by his count, this is only the first time President Obama, he did 320 rounds of golf. And so then you can say, well, how about Trump? How about Bush and the other Bush and Clinton and all that? And so a lot of different ways to write several stories using the same data set. To me, that's a fun one. Are you familiar? This one's real famous with Spotlight, the investigative unit out of the Boston Globe.
And the movie that
Yeah.
you made. And
Yeah. Familiar with the movie?
Yes, great.
Familiar? Okay, if you haven't seen it, this won the Oscar for Best Picture in the US. And it was a film recreation, dramatization of the Spotlight Boston Globe team that did really one of the most famous data-driven stories, as you see here, where they were able to win a Pulitzer Prize and then have a movie made about them relating to the systemic child abuse by Catholic priests. And they actually show you spreadsheets in the movie, and you could see me sitting there going, there's an Excel spreadsheet, there's a spreadsheet, because they showed how to make the spreadsheet. And these guys are so generous, data reporters I have found, and Bill mentioned this earlier. It's a group called Investigative Reporters and Editors, IRE, and I'll send you that link. There's a bunch of tip sheets and a bunch of cool stuff on there. I teach for them. And so these data journalists also are at the annual conference that I go to. I did not know them at all. I'm like, ooh, y'all are awesome. But I emailed them one day and said, can I have that spreadsheet that I saw in the movie? And that was at like noon. I had the spreadsheet in my email box by 5 p.m. Here you go.
Wow.
People are good. You know, journalists want to help each other. And so then we were able to teach our students, watch this movie, it's so inspiring. Journalist is hero, right? And then this was what we call the money column. Was the abuse acknowledged by the archdiocese? No, but they were able to. Here's the first name and the last name of the priest and what happened. You know, accusation settled, accused in a lawsuit. They died before anything could happen. Accused. But they built this spreadsheet themselves using isolated reports, interviews. And if you've seen the movie, and I think at least one of you has, the directories every year, where are the priests? And they were able to track when priests were leaving their particular parish. And what they were able to uncover was there would be an accusation, and then the priest, they'd move the priest and they'd do it again, and they'd move them and do it again. And so anyway, watch the film. So that's a real famous one. It's a make your own example. And this is one that I just like to show my students. And this is, forgive me, it's very US centric, but a lot of controversy about American football and the idea that our guys get concussions when they're playing. And I wanted to show this to you, even though it's not as relatable, because it's a shining example of the NFL, the National Football League, a private entity, created a spreadsheet, sent it out and said, you know, this is where all the concussions were, not as many as we thought. Well, the New York Times said, wait a minute, we're going to go back and look at all the reports of all the, media reports, all the different, and compile this ourselves. And so just because an entity gives you a spreadsheet, check it. If you're not sure, it's not just because it's a spreadsheet doesn't mean that it's automatically correct. You've got people who, it's almost like that misleading press release, right? That leaves out the news and gives you some fluff in data form. And so they analyzed it. And my lesson that I always tell my students is, be careful. What is the NFL's agenda to minimize the concussion story? And it was just PR. That's all it was. Yes.
It's relatable because remember there's a story based on the Will Smith story, concussion. The Nigerian doctor who investigated and came out with how it was connected to Alzheimer's disease. The head injuries. So yeah, we can relate.
You can relate. There's a great connection. It's a big story. Yeah. And I mean, certainly you could report this and say, according to the NFL's data, but the New York Times has a data team, and I will acknowledge that it probably took some time to check. And we got to have a reality check here and go, do we have time for that? But it's just something that I bring up because as you guys are journalists, you got to use those same journalistic skills, right? Okay, so I want to show you IRE.org. Lots of cool information on here. Oh, they want me to do my login. Be a member. I have it set. But you don't have to be a member. It just knows that I am, so it asks for my stuff. But I wanted to point out a couple of opportunities to you. There's a ton of training. There are a lot of resources that you can look at. under ire.org. They do train internationally. I use all of their techniques, because even though I was self-taught initially, I was lucky enough to be able to go to Columbia, Missouri and get trained up by these guys. And so I'm able to teach their methods to our students and anybody else who wants it. But using their techniques, I want to point out that a lot of their if this like really speaks to your soul and you want to take it a step further, there's fellowships and scholarships, and there are online training opportunities. And so you can look at what's available and you can get a fellowship or a scholarship. They have a couple of really cool fellowships for educators and journalists of color. They've got different kinds of basic data journalism, and then more advanced stuff. So if you decide that you want to, oh, here it is, try to get more training, the beauty of it is so much of it is online. And you can also reach out to them and ask them to do special training. If you've got an organization back home that folks are belonging to, they will often do specialized training for you. I will too. Pardon? Yes, perfect.
We literally asked them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they would say they'd be okay to do that for free, or?
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Yeah, yeah. And if when you call them, they're wonderful folks. Tell them you were here and that you got trained by me, because they train me and I train at their conferences, and they might refer you to a working journalist or a professor, and they may even refer you back to me, in which case I'm glad to do another online session for your group later on down the road. So yeah, but
I'll
yes.
contact them. Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah, but this is kind of ground zero for us in terms of training. There are some European examples. I'm sure there are consortiums that you can find that specialize just in data. Now, because it's 11, I'm not going to get into too much. We need to be done at 11:15, Bill. Okay, so I'm going to do just a demo, and I'm going to give you these formulas and let you play, and feel free to either watch or move along with me. But if you want, go ahead and open the budget. And I'm going to go a little bit faster just in the interest of time. But this is what we call city budget. I wanted to show you just a few more examples of really simple formulas, because most any beat that you're on, if you're able to follow the money, you want to get the budget if it's possible. And you might be covering a nonprofit or something that is not a government entity. But one of my first questions is, can you get a budget? How realistic is this for you guys, do you think? Do you work with budgets very often? Okay, so it's pretty realistic. I have trained journalists in other parts of the world who say, I'll never get a budget from my government entity. But some places you can, and definitely any entity that you're covering. And so this would be, and I'm not wild about this year and next year. This is just a training spreadsheet. So I would make sure that I knew this was like 2022 and 2023, right? Because I don't want to be like looking back on this in 3 or 4 years going, which year was that? So you want to be as clear as you can. And so you've got the budget for last year, the budget for this year, and you want to calculate the difference. All right. So the way you would do that is just beyond simple, right? The change, you could the difference or the change. And how would you do that?
So it's C2 minus B2.
You got it. So what you're doing is you're taking the new and then subtracting the old to get the change or the difference, right? Okay. Yeah. So there's the difference, 567,000 just for the police. So you copy that formula down, double click. Now notice, don't freak out when you see these little number things. I did the first time I saw like, what happened? It's just you need to make your column a little bigger, okay? So that's, you can also drag the formula all the way down. And the formula is equals C2 minus B2. You're just calculating the difference, the change. Okay, equals C2 minus B2. The new minus the old. And there are a few little spaces here, and because there's some stuff missing, I'll cut that out, but that's the gist. And so you can see quite a bit of difference. It's $4 million difference in expenditures. All right, then you see the revenues. They're supposed to balance. So you got the difference. Yes, equals C2 minus B2, and then copy it down. Now, this is helpful, but to me, percentages would be easier for readers. You know, our readers might get a little lazy. They need to know a percentage, right? You with me, everybody?
My mission is acting up.
Okay, so here we're going to say percent change. I'm going a little bit faster. Oops, as soon as I get this percent change. Do a save as. And feel free to just watch as a demo, and I will give you these formulas as well. And I'll also send you the spreadsheet already filled out, so you'll have the formulas in them. Okay, that will be, I think, maybe helpful as well. So let's look at percent change. Percent change from last year to this year. Okay, so write percent change down as new minus old divided by old. New minus old divided by old. A memory trick is new minus old divided by old. That's NOO. Do we get into journalism to make money? No, that's how I remember the calculation. So here it is. And I'll see if I can't make it just a little bigger. I wanted to have a small spreadsheet so you could see it a little bit better. Okay, equals. You're telling it you want to do some math. Open parentheses, new minus old. Close parentheses, right? Because you wanted to do that first. Divided by is the slash old. Okay, so there's the formula. New minus old divided by old. The reason this is in parentheses is you want it to calculate that first, then divide. Remember this? I was like digging back into like, oh, maybe 6th grade or something like that. So there's your formula. And again, I'll send this to you so you'll have it. Now that looks completely unhelpful, right? All those decimals, no. So you want to go up here to formatting. I'm under home, general. There's the percentage. That is way easier to look at. And so the police force has got a 3% change from the previous year. Double click. Now it looks a little bit weird because I copied the formula down and there's nothing here, but so you could, you could do that, make it prettier if you wanted, whatever. But where is the story, do you think? What's most interesting about the percent change in the expenditures?
The city manager's office.
The city manager, what's happening there?
2%.
Whoa, this guy or person almost doubled their budget. So that's a great place to start. This tells you what to ask, because it doesn't give you the answer, it tells you where to go to ask. So you could say, I've noticed your budget is doubled. Would you like to elaborate?
That number 92% is almost certainly they added a new full-time person in that office.
And that's a story. What are they doing?
Person, now it's two.
Yeah, it could be as simple as that. But maybe you didn't have that story and now you do.
Yeah. And
the
police looks like they're trying to defund the police.
It looks like they're not really wanting to boost the police.
Now,
Good point.
in the United States. This is where the reporter, this is where the human has the contact. Police salaries are usually unionized contracts.
Yeah.
3% annual increase is standard increase. So there's nothing fishy there, potentially, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. But those other changes, there's something there that's really with that.
Yeah, yes, and I'm really interested in why the city council got a bump of 60% in 1 year. Good question for those guys. Did they just give themselves a raise in an executive quote closed session? I don't know. It's worth asking. Okay, the other thing, let's look at revenues for a minute. What jumps out to you as something interesting in this change over time from 1 year to the next?
Well, user fees is up 72%.
User fees up 72%. Well, what are user fees and why are they going up 72%? So you got another story, right?
The new water plants online, and this is the increase in water prices to build it.
Could very well be. I'm not even remotely suggesting this is nefarious, but it's stories, right? Bunch of different stories in a budget. All right, so let's ponder this a little bit more in a different way. Let me move. Yeah.
But this figure don't reflect the deficit or in over a surplus.
Yes. This budget example, it happens to be balanced. So that's also, yeah, for sure. Good point. Something to think about. There aren't any negatives. It's not out of balance. It happens to be a balanced budget. Yes. Okay, now let's look at the percent of total. Who gets the biggest piece of the pie in our budgets? All right. And so what we want to do is kind of get some more context with, usually I just go percent total and shorten it. Now, what you're going to do here is you're going to take each individual item and divide it by the total. So in this example, I'm going to be using the 2023 budget, so that's C2, and I'm going to divide it by the total, which is going to be C9. Okay. Looks freaky because it's in decimal, so I'm going to go over and do the percent. Hmm?
C9.
Oh, yes, C9. Did I say the wrong thing there? C9. Yes, so the formula is equals C2 divided by C9. That is the first item divided by the total. Okay, the first item divided by the total expenditures.
You try to determine what to get.
Yes, so we're going to try to get the percent of total. So the police force takes up 40% of the budget. And maybe that's why they only got a 3% raise with the police union. We don't know. But that's a pretty big chunk. And I think pretty instructive. Now, if you double click down or drag it down, either way, but double click's usually better. Notice how it starts freaking out with these errors. And so what we need to do is anchor our formula, because what has happened is when you're copying down the formula, it's very literal. So what it did here with this formula was it did C2 divided by C9. Then when we copied it down, it went C3 and went to C10. And then C4 and went to C11. It's literal. It thinks you want to just keep going. So we got to anchor the total address. Okay, got to anchor the formula. So what we're going to do is come over here and you're going to put, and I don't know why it is, a dollar sign. You use a dollar sign to anchor the formula. $9, and it's different on a Mac. I think it might be different on a PC, and I think it might be different on Google Sheets. And sometimes you need to use two. Let me make sure this is the right one for this particular. Yes, it was. Okay. All right. So equals C2 divided by C $9. That dollar sign anchored C9. So it grabbed it from there and went to there, right? So it anchored here. Then over here, you want to look at, let me clean this up a little bit. Now here, this is a little bit weird. We got to look and go, okay, the new anchor is C19. There's the total of revenue. So let's tweak this here. That is going to be C14 anchored with C19. See where I'm going? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Going a little faster. Okay, so it's anchored.
And then the correct percentage, you see, so for this year, you have to anchor it with C9. So put it
C19,
at
okay.
the C.
All right, so you had to anchor the formula to be on the total expenditures. So percent of total,
This the
cops are getting 40%.
system. So
Maybe the manager is gonna say, hey,
C19.
you know, I'm still only 3% of the total budget. Give me a break. I need to hire another person. We don't know. We gotta ask. What else jumps out at you? Let's look at revenues, percent of total. Where does the city get its money?
Property tax.
Primarily from property taxes. It really just depends. And then now they might say, oh, but the user fees, you know, let's color there. Okay, so percent of total, what piece of the pie do the police take up, for example? Okay, so I will be available to answer any questions. I'll send you this spreadsheet with all the formulas on it, if that's okay with you guys, Bill, Jotten. And so you'll have them. And if you have any questions at any point, I'm available, not only while you're here in the States, but I'm happy to talk to you and walk you through any issues, do some screen sharing when you guys get back home. Yes, I will share. You will have my email because I'm going to do a reply all to Bill's email because I'm on it. And I'll just introduce myself through email and go, hey, it's me. Here's some spreadsheets and here's this one.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Amazing.
Yes.
So you have a cheat sheet.
Yes, I'm gonna have a cheat sheet that's attached to this email that's got formulas. And I call it my super giant cheat sheet. And then I'm also gonna have a list of links to resources of some particularly good trainers online. So you don't just have to Google, how do you calculate whatever. There are some specific trainers. One in particular is a data editor at the Minneapolis Star Tribune, a woman who's got a whole training page that she gives you with sample data sets for free. And you can, and she walks you through it. So
As we've been doing all along, I'll share these links with Steve and Des, and they'll post it for everybody at AIPU and
Great.
all of your colleagues.
great. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So, in about 15 minutes.